Well, with me right now is Sue B. Parks, and she is the Orange County United Way's president and CEO, and she is on to talk about homelessness and what the United Way is doing about it. Welcome.
Thank you, Ken. I'm so glad to be here.
Nice to have you on today. Before we came on, we were talking, and obviously right now, this is huge. I mean, right literally this minute in the news, because we have the initiative somewhat, I don't know who's for it and who's against it now, on the Board of Supervisors, and with the tent cities, so to speak. There's been a huge amount of backlash with that right now. And interesting, you don't know what side each supervisor is on because they keep changing. So let's go back a little bit, because I know the United Way started this initiative a while back. And one of the catalysts from this that you just told me about is looking at other places that have taken this upon themselves and kind of changed the focus and direction. So tell us how this got started and what the initial plan is for this.
Okay, well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to share what's going on, because it's such an important topic and so timely with everything happening. A few years ago, the United Way was looking at what was going on in the community. What do we really need to do to help make this community even better? If we woke up 10 years later, what we'd want the headlines in Orange County to be? And one of those we started looking at was actually homeless children and housing insecure children. And there are 28,000 of children in Orange County that are living in either they're homeless or they're in a housing insecure, maybe a motel or bouncing around. And we started looking at that issue and saying, this is something that we as a community need to rally around and help. And in doing that, we realized there needs to be more data. We need to understand really what's happening with the situation, why is it growing, what the cost of it is. And so we went with ourselves in Jamboree Housing and the ACCOC, the city organization. We commissioned a study with UCI, and we got some of the top researchers at UCI to really take a serious look at this issue and to help us understand what is going on in this whole homelessness area. And out of that, and that was published last year, and it's you can find it on our site in terms of going on Orange County United Way's website. But anyway, what happened is we found out that the cost of homelessness to this community is $300 million a year, just managing it on the streets. And if we house the people that are most vulnerable, the chronically ill, we'd save half of that amount of money. So we're like, wow, this is really intriguing stuff. And so we said, let's take a step back and look at best practices. Who's doing this really well around the country, and how are they doing it? Who's made a real dent in their homelessness population? And in doing that, we uncovered some different cities, but we really landed on Orlando, Florida as being somewhat an interesting model. And so again, that was one of the things that we took a look at as best practices, but they had cut their street homelessness 50% in 3 years. Yes. Yeah.
And also interesting, although this has nothing to do with that Orlando is also in Orange County.
It is. Yes, and there are similarities.
Let me ask you this, and it's something that I was listening to a radio station, and someone came on and talked about this issue. I forget who it was, but it might have been one of the supervisors here. But they sort of categorize the homelessness in 3 or 4 categories. You have, and so, of course they overlap, but people with some sort of mental illness, people who are have addictions to whatever it may be. It could have been illegal drugs, it could have been opioids, it could have been anything. And then you have the individuals that are maybe a family or that for some reason, not of their own doing, lost their job, lost their housing. Do you kind of see it that way in those 3, or maybe there's 4 or 5 basic categories?
Yeah, so and I'll go back to the cost study that I mentioned that we did. One of the interesting things that came out of that is that we found that the average homeless person in Orange County was a 50-year-old male who had lived here over 10 years, and they had some disruption in their life. Maybe they got ill and had a disabling condition, or they lost their job, or something happened in their life that caused them to lose their home. They got behind in rent for 2 or 3 months. So no question, that's a big part. I think that also the study found is those chronically homeless, the people that have the, maybe there's mental illness, maybe there's some other issue, that they're never going to be self-sufficient, as we would say self-sufficient, which is what was referred to as the chronically homeless, that those folks we really, really need to do something about right away. And I think as we start peeling back, all of these things can be segments. There are veterans on our street, people who fought for us that need to be taken care of. There are single women out there, and certainly their families. So one of the projects that we're doing as we get all together is start understanding those segments and who's out there, and how do we house the most vulnerable as quickly as possible.
Well, that's a very good point that you brought up. You know, on one end are the families that maybe lost a job and through unforeseen circumstances. Those are probably, in some cases, the easiest people to help, because there's not a mental illness. It's getting them back on their feet again. But with people who are chronically homeless, have the mental illness, the question is, are they now going to be taken care of for another 30, 40 years of their life by the state, by the taxpayers, by the United Way? How do you look at that?
Well, I'm going to go back and share a best practice that I was mentioning in Orlando, Florida. And you know, what they found is, and I'll say that some other similarities, they had about 3 million in their population in their area that they were measuring. It's about the same here. The point of time count, which is the HUD count of homelessness, it's done the same way every time it's done, so it's a nice baseline. That we were with 50 people or something. It was like we have about 4,800 here, as they would look at Orange County, California, and they had maybe 4,750 or something. It was so close. But what they found is that when they went to the chronically homeless and they offered them housing first, a place to live, that changed everything in terms of them wanting to go and to be into a place where they didn't have to wake up every night, worry that something, that they were going to go the next day. And that comes with, and that type of housing situation comes with that care. And that care makes such a difference, that there's a case manager looking in and making sure that you get back on your medication, that you have the services and support, and you're taking care of yourself. And they found that these people really thrive with that kind of program. And maybe there's some folks that would be able to go back to work, but really what we're talking about is a population that, as a community, we all need to realize that we need to help. And there's government money, maybe there's philanthropy money, but together as a community we need to come together and do this. And that's what they did very well in that particular market, and I know we can do here. Did
some of those people end up becoming self-sufficient, or has the study not gone on long enough?
You know, I think in terms of when somebody has a chronic disabling condition, that might be hard to expect that is going to be the typical outcome. But we had a gentleman, we did a kickoff. We built together this amazing group of business leaders and philanthropy leaders and faith leaders and government leaders to come together united to end homelessness. And if you want to learn what we're doing, it's unitedtoendhomelessness.org. In terms of doing that. But when we did the kickoff at UCI on February 28th, we had a gentleman there, and he went by Santa Bob was his name, and he had developed a disease. He was chronically homeless, and he actually told his story. He was able to lived on the streets for a while, but worked his way to being in a place that he felt he could help others who fell in his situation, and got a job. It's not going to be the type of job that's going to allow him to be self-sufficient forever, right? But he's helping other people realize that they can get their life back in order and do a life that's fulfilling as well. So that might be a rare story, but those stories exist, and it's heartening to know that by helping somebody, they're willing and now able to help others. What about the housing? Where does that go? And again, you know, we've seen what's happening right now, that people don't want to see tents surrounded their elementary school, their homes, and those areas. So those communities look like in for a long, protracted fight with the county right now. So that whole thing could change. But people that are, you know, paying their own way, have a nice home and all that, they don't want to see that in their neighborhood, so to speak. So what is your plan as far as housing these people? So the tents that you're talking about, you know, those are temporary. We're really focused on permanent solutions, you know, the long-term solutions. There is a really vibrant plan in terms of for the community about building these type of housing that comes with the permanent supportive care. If all of us did, if every city had a piece of that, it is spread out over the whole county. And some of these, they're so gorgeous. I've seen plans for some of them. No one would know that it's not any different than any other complex that's going up. So I think that what we'd love to do is people to really become aware that these are people that we're talking about, people who aren't problems, these are people with problems, and that as a community we can step up and help them. As I said in the cost study, it's more economical as taxpayers for us to get the people who need housing and services housed. So it's a financial thing, but it's also they're real people. Something happened, they're not able to take care of themselves, so it's good for our heart too. So if people get educated on this, I think people will be more open-minded and get not thinking that they're not looking at a tent, they're looking at a complex that might have some folks out there. They did in Orlando, Florida, they put 2,000 people in scattered sites around their community that came with permanent supportive care, care that they need, and with virtually no other problem, because everybody occasionally has a bad neighbor, right? But overall, it's really seamless, very smooth, and it seemed to work out really well because these people come with support, they come with care, and the faith community can come in and help provide community for those folks that don't have family in the area or don't have like a network of people to rely on. There's a role for all of us together to do what's right, and it's both economically and it's good for our hearts too.
What about looking beyond Orange County, being that this is one of the most expensive places to live, as we know, and seeing other solutions of other cities that they may go to, or do the other cities have the same problem? Outside of California, where it's 1/3 the cost to live. Yeah,
it's a problem across our country, and that's one of the things that we found as we started looking at situations, and I think every community set up to do, setting up to see how they can support their own community. It is around the country. I do believe that every time one of the first things that is offered if they find somebody isn't from our location is the service providers have ways to offer people to get them back home, connect them with their family if they for some reason aren't from here, and their family that can help, because a lot of times people, especially if they have maybe a mental illness or something, aren't in touch, and we can help make that happen. The service provider community would love to make that happen, but many people are from here and they don't have those networks, and we need to help them.
All right, very good. The website is I'm going to look here, unitedtoendhomelessness.org. So you can go on there and find out more information. And good luck with this. And I'm sure we'll have you on maybe with an update in a few months and see how it's all going.
I would love to come back and give you an update and help make
Sue,
sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ken.
Thank you for coming on, and we'll be right back.